My mother called me a liar while I was standing beside my grandmother's casket. "Stop this, Madeline." "Not here," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. My father didn't even hesitate. "She's making things up. She always does when money's involved. So why were they so desperate to shut me down? What had Grandma actually signed before she died? And why was I holding a recording I hadn't dared to play until now?" I could feel every eye on me as whispers spread through the crowd. My fingers tightened around the small device in my pocket. Then I pressed play. My mother's voice came through the speaker, clear, unmistakable, and completely different from the woman standing beside me. "If you're watching from somewhere outside the US, tell me where you're from and what time it is where you are. I'm curious who's here with me right now, and if you've ever been called a liar for telling the truth, you might want to stay for this." 6 months before that morning at the cemetery, my grandmother called me on a Tuesday night and asked a question that didn't sound like her. "Madeline," she said, her voice softer than usual, "does it make sense for my account to be going down if I'm not really spending anything?" I remember pausing with my laptop open in front of me, spreadsheets still glowing on the screen. I spent my days tracing financial inconsistencies for a living, quietly reconstructing what people tried to hide. But hearing that question from her felt different. Personal. "What do you mean going down?" I asked. She hesitated. I thought I had more. And now it feels like I don't. Maybe I'm forgetting things." That last sentence stayed with me longer than anything else. My grandmother, Evelyn Harper, was the most detail-oriented person I knew. She balanced her checkbook every Sunday afternoon with a cup of tea and a sharpened pencil. She didn't forget things like that, not suddenly. "Can I come by tomorrow?" I asked. She exhaled like she'd been waiting for me to offer. "I'd like that." The next evening, I drove out to her house in Naperville, the same house she'd lived in for over 40 years, the same kitchen where she used to quiz me on multiplication tables while baking. Nothing looked different when I walked in. Same curtains, same clock ticking too loudly on the wall, same framed photos, but she looked unsettled. I printed a few things, she said, handing me a neat stack of bank statements. "It's probably nothing. Your mother says I worry too much." That caught my attention immediately. "She's seen these?" I asked. Evelyn nodded. "Karen said everything looked fine, that I shouldn't stress." I didn't respond right away. I just sat down at the table and started reading. At first glance, the statements didn't scream fraud. No massive withdrawals, no obvious red flags. Just routine expenses, utilities, groceries, insurance. But then I saw it. A series of withdrawals, small, consistent, and spaced just far enough apart to avoid attention. A few hundred here, a few hundred there. Always rounded, always quiet. Someone who didn't want to trigger alerts. I flipped to the next page, same pattern. "How long has this been happening?" I asked. Evelyn leaned against the counter, arms folded. "I'm not sure. A few months, maybe." "A few months." I kept going. Then I saw the transfer. It was larger than the rest, significantly larger. Not enough to raise alarms on its own, but completely out of character for her spending habits. 5 figures. My stomach tightened. "Grandma, do you remember making this transfer?" I turned the statement toward her and pointed. She walked over slowly, adjusting her glasses as she leaned in. "No," she said almost immediately. Then she frowned. "Wait, maybe. Your father handles some things for me sometimes." That was the second time something didn't sit right. "Handles what exactly?" "Oh, just paperwork, banking calls." "It's easier for me," she said, but there was uncertainty in her voice now. "He's always been good with that kind of thing." I didn't comment. I just made a mental note. "Do you have online access?" I asked. She shook her head. "Your mother said it's safer if I don't." "Safer for who?" I kept that question to myself. Instead, I organized the statements in chronological order and started mapping the pattern in my head. Frequency, amount, timing. It was instinct at that point. "Has anything else changed recently?" I asked. "New documents. Anything you signed." Evelyn hesitated again. Longer this time. Well, your parents brought over some papers a few weeks ago. Something about updating beneficiaries. They said it was routine. Do you remember what they said exactly? She looked down at her hands. Just that it would make things easier later. That it was better for the family. There it was. That phrase again. Better for the family. I'd heard it before. Usually right before someone gave up something they didn't fully understand. Do you still have copies of those documents I asked? I think so, she said, walking toward the hallway. I keep everything in the study. While she was gone, I stared at the transfer again. It wasn't just the amount. It was the destination. The account name wasn't fully visible, but there was enough there. R. Long. I leaned back slowly in my chair. Richard Long. My father. I didn't jump to conclusions. That's not how I worked. Patterns first. Evidence second. Conclusions last. But I couldn't ignore it either. Evelyn came back with a folder neatly labeled, of course. She handed it to me with a small, uneasy smile. I told you it's probably nothing. I opened it. Inside were several documents printed, signed, dated. Some looked standard, others didn't. I recognized the formatting immediately. Beneficiary updates, authorization forms, and then I saw the signature. Her name was there, but the pen pressure was wrong. The slant was inconsistent. The loops on certain letters were tighter than usual. I'd spent years analyzing signatures in fraud cases. This wasn't definitive proof of forgery, but it was enough to raise a serious question. Grandma, I said carefully, do you remember signing these? She stepped closer, squinting at the page. I remember them bringing papers, she said slowly, but I don't remember this one specifically. That wasn't the answer I needed. It was worse. I closed the folder gently. Okay, I said. We're not going to assume anything yet, but I want to take a closer look at this, just to be sure. She nodded, but I could see the worry settling in now. I trust your parents, she said quietly. They wouldn't do anything to hurt me. I didn't respond right away, because the truth was I didn't know if that was still true. I gathered the documents, stacked them neatly, and slid the bank statements back into place. Let me review everything tonight, I said. I'll come back tomorrow and we'll talk through it together. She gave me a small, grateful smile. As I stood up to leave, I glanced one more time at the transfer. R. Long. It wasn't proof. Not yet. But it was enough to make one thing clear. This wasn't a misunderstanding. And whatever was happening, it had been happening quietly for a while. That night back at my apartment, I spread everything across my desk and opened my laptop. I wasn't just looking for errors anymore. I was looking for intent. And the deeper I went, the more one question kept repeating in my mind. How many times had my grandmother signed something she didn't fully understand? And who made sure she didn't? The next morning, I didn't go straight back to my grandmother's house. I went to the bank. Not the branch closest to her neighborhood, the one my parents usually used, but a larger location about 20 minutes away. Fewer familiar faces. Fewer chances of someone calling ahead. I walked in with a folder under my arm and a very specific plan. I need to review recent account changes for Evelyn Harper, I told the woman at the front desk. I'm here with her authorization. Her name tag read, Susan Miller. She gave me a polite professional smile. Are you listed on the account? Not directly, I said, but I do have a signed authorization for information access. I slid the paper across the counter. She glanced at it, then at me weighing something. Give me a moment, she said, picking up the phone. I waited, watching the quiet choreography of the bank around me. People depositing checks. A man arguing softly about overdraft fees. Nothing unusual. That was the thing about financial manipulation. It almost never looked dramatic from the outside. Ms. Long, Susan said, returning. We can review limited information with you. Please come this way. She led me into a small office and closed the door behind us. What specifically are you looking for? She asked. Any recent changes to beneficiaries, authorized users, or power of attorney, I said. And I'd like to understand the pattern behind recent transfers. She nodded, typing as she listened. Okay, I do see several updates in the past 4 months, she said slowly. That's more than typical. How many? I asked. 5 separate modifications, she said, turning her screen slightly toward me. 3 beneficiary updates, 1 change in account control structure, and 1 designation of financial authority. My chest tightened. Can you show me the documents tied to those? She hesitated. I can show you summaries. Full copies require the account holder or legal authority. That's fine, I said. Summaries are enough for now. She clicked through the records. First update, she said, pointing added Richard Long as an authorized financial contact. That's my father. Second update, 2 weeks later, modified beneficiary percentages. To what? She scanned the line. It shifted a significant portion toward Richard Long. Of course it did. And the third further increased his allocation. I leaned back slightly, letting the pattern settle. Gradual escalation. Not a single dramatic change, just a series of small, controlled adjustments. Exactly the kind of strategy someone would use to avoid triggering concern. And the designation of financial authority, I asked. Susan clicked again. That's a durable power of attorney, she said. It allows the designated person to manage financial decisions if the account holder is unable to do so. Who's listed? She looked at me, then back at the screen. Richard Long and Karen Long. Joint authority. My parents. I didn't react outwardly, but inside everything aligned a little too cleanly. Do you have any notes attached to these updates? I asked. Internal notes, she clarified. Yes. She hesitated again, longer this time. I can't share everything, she said carefully, but I can tell you there were multiple in-person visits tied to these changes. With my grandmother present, she nodded. Yes. And in your professional opinion, I paused, choosing my words carefully. Did anything about those visits stand out? Susan didn't answer immediately. Then she said, there are times when clients rely heavily on family members to communicate. That's not unusual. That wasn't an answer. I held her gaze. And sometimes, she added quietly, we make notes when a client seems uncertain or defers completely to someone else. There it was. Were there notes like that? I asked. She didn't confirm it directly. She didn't need to. I would recommend, she said, her voice measured now, that your grandmother speak with someone independently about her financial arrangements. I nodded. I intend to. She turned the screen back toward herself and clicked into another section. There's one more thing, she said. A document related to beneficiary changes. What about it? It was processed quickly. Same-day submission and approval. That's efficient but unusual for multiple changes in a short window. Was there anything unusual about the document itself? She hesitated. The signature, she said slowly, was accepted. But there was a verification note attached. What kind of note? She looked at me again, clearly deciding how much she could say. Just that additional confirmation was required at the time. My mind moved fast. Verification issues, multiple changes, escalating control. Can I see the signature? I asked. She shook her head, not without full authorization. That was fine. I already knew what I needed to know. I gathered my folder and stood. Thank you, I said. You've been very helpful. She gave me a small, almost sympathetic look. Just make sure your grandmother understands everything she's signing. I will. But as I walked out of the bank, I couldn't shake the feeling that understanding wasn't the issue. Control was. I drove straight back to Naperville. Evelyn was in the living room when I arrived, flipping through a magazine she clearly wasn't reading. You look serious, she said as I walked in. I need to ask you something, I said, setting my bag down. And I need you to answer honestly, even if you're not sure. She nodded slowly. When Mom and Dad brought those documents over, did they explain each one to you? She hesitated. They said it was routine, she replied, that it would simplify things. I trusted them. Did you feel like you could say no? That question lingered in the air longer than anything else I'd asked. Evelyn looked down at her hands. I didn't want to make things difficult, she said quietly. That was my answer. I took a breath. Grandma, I think there's a real possibility that some of these changes were made without you fully understanding them. She didn't argue. She didn't defend them. She just sat there very still. I don't remember signing everything she admitted after a moment. Some of it's fuzzy. I reached into my folder and pulled out the document with her signature. Look at this, I said gently. She studied it, her brow furrowing. That doesn't look like mine, she whispered. I didn't say anything, because hearing her say it mattered more than me pointing it out. And this gave them control, she asked. Yes, I said. At least partially. She leaned back slowly as if something inside her had just shifted. I thought they were helping me, she said. I sat down across from her. I think they convinced you of that, I replied. Silence settled between us. Not heavy, just real. After a moment, she looked up at me, her eyes clearer than they had been the night before. What do we do now? That was the question. And for the first time, I didn't have an easy answer. We gather more information, I said. And we protect you, she nodded. Then after a pause, she said something that changed everything. If they're willing to do this, they won't stop. I met her gaze. I know. She folded her hands together. Then we need proof, she said. Not suspicion, not theory, proof. I hesitated for a second, just long enough to feel the weight of what I was about to suggest. There is a way, I said, carefully. She waited. We record them. The words hung in the air. Evelyn didn't react immediately. She just looked at me, searching my face. That feels wrong, she said softly. I understand, replied. But if they're pressuring you, if they're guiding you into signing things you don't fully understand, then we need a record of that. She looked down again. I never thought I'd need to protect myself from my own children. Neither did I. But here we were. After a long moment, she exhaled. If it's the only way to know the truth, she said, her voice steadier now, then we do it. I nodded. Okay. We didn't say anything else for a while. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small recording device. Nothing fancy, just reliable. I set it on the table between us. This stays hidden, I said, and we only use it when they're here. She stared at it. Then she nodded once, slow, decisive, and just like that, everything shifted. We weren't guessing anymore. We were preparing, because the next time my parents walked through that door, we wouldn't just be listening. We'd be documenting. The first time I placed the recorder in my grandmother's house, my hands didn't feel as steady as I expected. Not because I doubted what we were doing, but because I understood exactly what it meant. Once you start documenting people you love, you're already admitting something is broken. Where should it go? Evelyn asked quietly, standing near the kitchen doorway. I looked around the living room. It hadn't changed in decades. Same floral couch, same wooden coffee table, same cabinet filled with porcelain she never let anyone touch. It needs to be somewhere natural, I said. Close enough to pick up voices, but not obvious. I walked over to the side table beside her armchair, the one where she kept her reading glasses and a small stack of mail. That works, I said, placing the device beneath a folded magazine. It won't look out of place. Evelyn watched me, her expression thoughtful. I still don't like this, she admitted. I know, I said. You're not supposed to. She gave a small, sad smile. Your grandfather used to say that when something feels wrong, it usually is. I paused, and sometimes I said it feels wrong because we've been told not to question it. She didn't respond to that. She just nodded and sat down slowly in her chair. We tested the recorder once, just a few sentences spoken casually. The playback was clear. Every word easy to understand. Too easy. When are they coming? I asked. Tomorrow afternoon, she said. Karen said she wanted to check in and go over a few things. Of course she did. Do you know what kind of things? Evelyn hesitated. She mentioned paperwork again. I felt something tighten in my chest. Okay, I said. Then tomorrow we listen. The next day I arrived early. Not through the front door, through the back. Evelyn let me in quietly, and I slipped into the guest bedroom down the hall. The door stayed slightly open, just enough for me to hear without being seen. The recorder was already in place. We didn't speak much. There wasn't anything left to say. At exactly 2:14 p.m., I heard the front door open. "Mom, you home?" Karen's voice carried easily through the house Warm practiced. "In here," Evelyn called back. Footsteps. 2 sets. Richard's voice followed lower, more direct. "Hey, Mom." "Hi," she replied. I stayed still, my phone in my hand as a backup recorder, though I doubted I'd need it.
"Thought we'd stop by, see how you're doing,"
Karen said. I could hear the smile in her voice.
"That's kind of you," Evelyn said.
A pause. Then the shift. It was subtle at first, the way Karen's tone sharpened just slightly. "We also brought those forms we talked about," she said. "Just a couple updates. Nothing complicated." Paper rustled. "More forms?" Evelyn asked. "It's just housekeeping," Richard added. "You don't want things getting messy later." I leaned closer to the door frame, listening carefully. "I thought we already handled that," Evelyn said. "You did?" Karen replied quickly. "This is just refining it, making sure everything's aligned."
Aligned.
Another word people used when they didn't want to explain what they were really doing. There was a small silence.
"I don't know,"
Evelyn said. Madeline looked at some of the papers last time. She seemed concerned.
"That did it."
Karen's tone changed instantly. "Madeline is overthinking things." She said, a hint of irritation slipping through. "That's what she does." "She works with this kind of stuff," Evelyn said gently. "Yes, but she doesn't understand our situation," Richard cut in.
"This is family. It's different."
I felt my jaw tighten. "Different how?" Evelyn asked. Another pause. Then Karen again, softer this time. "Controlled. Mom, we're trying to make sure everything is taken care of. For everyone. You trust us, right?" There it was.
Not a question. A pressure point.
Evelyn didn't answer immediately.
"I do,"
she said finally. "I just want to understand what I'm signing." More paper movement.
"Of course,"
Karen said quickly. "It's just updating how your assets are distributed. Streamlining things." Streamlining for who? Evelyn asked. That question lingered. Longer than anything else. Richard cleared his throat. "For the family," he said. "So there's no confusion later." I could almost see the look on his face when he said it. Confident. Certain. Like the answer should end the conversation. But it didn't. "I'm not confused now," Evelyn said quietly. Silence. Then Karen sighed just enough to signal impatience. "Mom, you don't need to worry about the details," she said. "That's what we're here for." That sentence landed harder than anything else.
"You don't need to worry about the details."
"That's what we're here for." I glanced toward the living room, my pulse steady but sharp. Because that wasn't reassurance. That was control. "I'd like to read it," Evelyn said. "Of course," Karen replied, but there was tension underneath now. I heard pages turning. A few seconds passed. Then Evelyn spoke again. "This says something about transferring control," she said.
"What does that mean?"
Richard answered this time. "It just means we can help manage things if you ever need it." "If I ever need it," she repeated. "Yes," Karen said. "Exactly." Another pause. Then quiet but unmistakable. Karen added, "And honestly, Mom, it's better if we handle things now while you're still able to sign." My breath caught. Still able to sign. Not if you need help. Not if something happens. Now. Before you can't. Evelyn didn't speak for a few seconds. When she did, her voice was softer.
"I don't like how that sounds."
Karen's response came faster this time. Firmer. "You're overthinking it," she said. "Please don't make this harder than it needs to be." There it was again. The shift from persuasion to pressure. Richard stepped in. "Mom," he said, his tone lower now. "We've already discussed this."
"You agreed."
"I don't remember agreeing to this," Evelyn said. And that was the moment everything changed. Because instead of reassuring her, Karen laughed. Not loudly, not cruelly, but dismissively. "Mom," she said, "you don't remember a lot of things lately." The room went still. Even from down the hall, I could feel it. "That's not fair," Evelyn said quietly. "No one's saying it is," Richard replied. "We're just being realistic." I closed my eyes for a second. Because there it was. Not hidden, not subtle. Clear, deliberate. They knew. They knew exactly what they were doing. Let's just get this done, Karen said, her voice tightening.
It's better for everyone.
Paper slid across the table. A pen clicked. And then a long pause, longer than before. I held my breath without realizing it,
Because I didn't know what she would do.
I didn't know if she would give in or push back. And in that silence, one thought kept repeating in my mind. If she signs this, everything changes. I didn't move. Not when the pen clicked. Not when the paper slid closer to her. Because this wasn't just about what she would do. It was about what they believed they could get away with. Mom Karen said softer now, almost coaxing, "It's just a signature."
We've already talked about this.
Evelyn didn't answer right away. "I want to understand it," she said again, quieter this time, but steadier. Richard exhaled, and I could hear the shift in his tone. Less patience, more control.
It's not complicated, he said. It just formalizes what we've already been doing. Managing things for you. For me,
Evelyn repeated.
Yes, Karen said quickly. So you don't have to worry about anything.
Another silence. Then Evelyn asked the one question they didn't expect.
If it's for me,
why does it give you full control?
The air in the room tightened. I leaned closer to the door, my pulse slow but focused.
Karen didn't answer immediately. Instead, she tried a different angle. "Mom, you were tired," she said gently. "This isn't the time to go through every detail."
"I'm not too tired to read,"
Evelyn replied. That surprised me. It clearly surprised them too, because Richard's voice came back sharper this time. "We're not trying to trick you," he said. "We're trying to help."
"Then explain it," Evelyn said.
Another pause. Then Karen sighed longer, heavier.
"Fine,"
she said.
"It gives us authority to manage your accounts if needed. It also adjusts how things are distributed later.
It's standard." Adjusted how Evelyn asked. I could hear paper shifting again. Karen hesitated.
"Just simplifying," she said.
"Making sure everything goes where it should."
"Where you think it should," Evelyn said quietly.
That landed. Richard stepped in quickly.
"Mom, don't do this," he said.
"We're your family."
"And Madeline isn't," Evelyn asked.
Silence.
A real one this time.
I felt something shift in my chest. Because that question wasn't about documents anymore. It was about loyalty. Karen's voice came back tighter now.
"Madeline doesn't understand the bigger picture," she said. "She's looking for problems because that's her job."
"No," Evelyn said softly. "She's looking because something feels wrong."
I swallowed hard.
That was the first time she'd said it out loud.
"Something feels wrong."
Karen didn't like that.
"You're letting her put ideas in your head," she said. "That's not fair to us."
"What's not fair," Evelyn replied, "is asking me to sign something I don't fully understand."
Richard's patience snapped. "Mom," he said louder now, "you agreed to this already."
I don't remember that Evelyn said.
And then
Karen said it. The line that would echo later, clear as anything.
She won't remember this next week anyway. Time didn't stop.
But it slowed enough for me to feel every second of it.
Evelyn didn't speak.
Neither did Richard. Because even he seemed to realize what had just been said.
Too directly. Too honestly.
Karen tried to recover.
"That's not what I meant,"
she said quickly. "I just meant your memory has been inconsistent and we're trying to help before things get worse."
But it was too late.
The truth had already slipped through, and the recorder was capturing every word. Evelyn's voice when it came was different.
Not confused. Not uncertain. Clear.
I remember that she said. Karen didn't respond.
"I may forget some things," Evelyn continued, "but I won't forget how that sounded."
I felt something in me steady. Because this wasn't just evidence anymore. This was clarity. Richard shifted in his seat.
"Let's not turn this into something it's not," he said. "We're here to take care of you." "By taking control?" Evelyn asked. "By making sure things are handled properly?" he replied.
For who, she asked again. He didn't answer. Karen tried once more. "Mom, please," she said. "Just sign it. We can go over everything later if you want."
"No."
That wasn't how this worked. And for the first time, Evelyn didn't bend. "No," she said.
Just one word.
But it carried more weight than anything else she'd said that day.
Karen froze. "I'm not signing anything else today,"
Evelyn added. Not until I understand it fully. Richard exhaled sharply. This is exactly what I was talking about, he said. Madeline's gotten to you. No, Evelyn said again. I'm listening to myself. Another silence. This one heavier, because control had slipped. Just a little. Karen stood up. I could hear the movement. Fine, she said, her voice tight. If you want to make this difficult, that's your choice. I want to make it clear, Evelyn replied. Richard stood too. Let's go, he muttered. Footsteps. Paper being gathered quickly this time, less carefully. Karen paused before leaving. Mom, she said, her tone cold now, we're trying to do what's best for you. I hope you remember that. Evelyn didn't respond. The front door opened, then closed. And just like that, they were gone. I stayed where I was for a moment longer, listening to the silence they left behind. Then I stepped out into the living room. Evelyn was still sitting there, her hands folded in her lap. She looked up at me. They didn't expect me to say no, she said quietly. No, I replied. They didn't. I walked over to the side table and picked up the recorder. My hands were steady now. Because this was what we needed. Not assumptions, not suspicions. Proof. I pressed stop. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then Evelyn looked at the device in my hand. Did it get everything she asked? I nodded. Every word. She exhaled slowly. Not in relief. Not entirely. More like someone who had just accepted a truth they couldn't unsee. I never thought I'd hear my own daughter talk about me like that, she said. I sat down across from her. I know. She looked down at her hands again. I trusted them, she said. I know. Silence settled between us. But it wasn't empty. It was full of something else now. Understanding. After a moment, she looked back up at me. What happens next? She asked. That question felt heavier now. Because now, we weren't guessing anymore. We don't rush, I said. We do this the right way. She nodded. And if they try again, she asked. I glanced at the recorder in my hand. They probably will, I said. People don't stop when something is working. Her expression tightened slightly. Then we'll be ready, she said. I studied her for a moment. She looked older than she had a week ago, but also stronger, more certain. And that mattered, because whatever came next, she wasn't going to face it alone. I slipped the recorder back into my bag, but one thought stayed with me as I did. Because the recording didn't just prove pressure, it proved intent. And once intent is clear, everything changes. 2 weeks later, everything sped up. Up until then, my parents had been careful, measured, controlled. But after that afternoon, something shifted. Not in what they wanted, but in how quickly they tried to get it. Evelyn called me early on a Thursday morning. I'm at the hospital, she said. Her voice was steady but thinner than usual. What happened? I asked, already reaching for my keys. Just dizziness. They wanted to run tests. I'm on my way. By the time I got there, Karen and Richard were already in the room. Of course they were. Karen stood near the window, arms folded. Richard was talking to a doctor in low, serious tones. The kind of tone people use when they want to sound informed. Madeline, Karen said when she saw me. Not warm, not cold, just controlled. How is she? I asked, stepping past her. Evelyn looked smaller in the hospital bed, pale but alert. I'm fine, she said. They just want to keep me for observation. I nodded, but my attention shifted to the clipboard at the foot of her bed. Vitals, notes, medication. Doctor says it could be dehydration, Richard added. Nothing serious. The doctor turned toward me. Dr. Alan Brooks, he said. We're still evaluating, but your grandmother is stable. I'd like to understand her cognitive status, I said. Karen's head snapped slightly in my direction. Madeline, she said, a warning in her voice. But I didn't look at her. Dr. Brooks hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded. We've observed some mild cognitive fluctuation, he said carefully. Nothing uncommon for her age, but it does mean complex decisions should be reviewed with care. That was all I needed. Not a diagnosis. Just enough to confirm vulnerability. Thank you, I said. Karen stepped in quickly. We're already handling everything, she said. There's no need to complicate things. I'm not complicating anything, I replied calmly. I'm understanding it. Richard exhaled. This again, he said.
We're in a hospital, Madeline, not a courtroom. No, I said, but decisions made here still matter. Silence. Dr. Brooks cleared his throat. I'll give you some time, he said, stepping out. As soon as the door closed, the air changed. Karen turned to me. You need to stop, she said quietly. This is not helping. What's not helping, I replied, is pretending everything is fine. It is fine, Richard said. You're creating problems where there aren't any. I glanced at Evelyn. She was watching both of them. Listening. Grandma, I said gently, have you signed anything since you got here? Karen answered before she could. No, she said. And there's nothing she needs to sign. That was too quick, too firm. I didn't respond to Karen. I just looked at Evelyn. She hesitated. They brought some forms, she said slowly. Earlier this morning. My chest tightened. What kind of forms? Just standard hospital paperwork, Karen cut in. Can I see them? I asked. No, Richard said flatly. That's not necessary. That told me everything. I stepped closer to the bed. Grandma, do you still have them? Evelyn glanced toward the bedside drawer. Karen moved at the same time I did. Madeline, she said sharply, this is inappropriate. I stopped, but only for a second. Then I opened the drawer. Inside were several forms, some standard, just like Karen said, and one that wasn't. I recognized the structure immediately. Financial authorization. Expanded. Not just medical. Control. I picked it up. Why is this here? I asked. No one answered right away. Then Richard stepped forward. It's just in case he said. If something happens, we need to be able to act quickly. You already have power of attorney, I said. Karen's expression tightened. This is an update, she replied. An expansion, I corrected. Silence. Evelyn looked between us. I didn't sign that, she said. Karen forced a small smile. We were going to go over it with you, she said. Later, like last time Evelyn asked. That landed harder than anything I could have said. Richard exhaled sharply. This is getting ridiculous, he said. We're trying to protect her. From what I asked. From confusion. From mistakes, he said. Or from making her own decisions, I replied. Karen stepped closer to me. You need to stop framing this like a crime, she said quietly. It's not. I held her gaze. Then why does it feel like one? She didn't answer. Because she couldn't. Evelyn shifted slightly in the bed. I don't want to sign anything, she said. Karen turned to her. No one is forcing you, she said quickly. But her tone said something else. Pressure. Expectation. Control. Richard picked up the form from my hand. Fine, he said. We'll deal with it later. He folded it once. Too neatly. Like he wasn't done with it. Not even close. I watched him slide it into his folder. And that's when I realized something. This wasn't about one document or one moment. It was a process. Layered. Gradual. Relentless. Grandma, I said quietly, I'd like you to speak with someone independently. A lawyer. Karen shook her head immediately. That's unnecessary, she said. I disagree, I replied. Richard laughed short, dismissive. Of course you do, he said. Because you don't trust us. I didn't respond right away. Because that wasn't the real issue. I trust patterns, I said finally. And right now, the pattern isn't good. Silence filled the room again. Evelyn looked at me, then at them. I think I'd like that, she said. To talk to someone. Karen's jaw tightened. You don't need outside people involved, she said. I do, Evelyn replied. That was the second time she'd said no. And it carried even more weight. Because this time, she said it in front of them. Richard closed his folder. Fine, he said. Do whatever you want. But his tone made it clear. He didn't mean that. Not really. A nurse knocked and stepped inside, breaking the tension. Everything okay in here, she asked. Yes, Karen said immediately. No, I said at the same time. The nurse looked between us. Evelyn spoke. I'd like a moment alone with my granddaughter, she said. Karen didn't move. Mom, please, Evelyn said. That was enough. Reluctantly, Karen and Richard stepped out. The door closed behind them, and the room finally felt quiet again. Real quiet. Evelyn looked at me. They're not going to stop, are they? She asked. I shook my head. No, I said. Not unless something stops them. She nodded slowly. Then we need to be ready, she said. I glanced toward the door, then back at her. We are, I said. But even as I said it, I knew something else was coming. Because people who move this carefully don't give up after one setback. They adapt. And whatever my parents were planning next, it wasn't going to be smaller. It was going to be harder to see and harder to stop. I didn't wait long after that hospital visit. The next morning, I called Daniel Kaplan. "I need a consultation," I said. "Family matter, financial control, possible coercion." There was a brief pause on the line. "Can you come in today?" he asked. "Yes." Kaplan's office was in downtown Chicago, glass walls, clean lines, nothing personal on display. The kind of place that made everything feel deliberate. He greeted me with a firm handshake. "Madeline Long," he said. "That's me. Have a seat." I didn't waste time. I laid everything out. Bank statements, authorization forms, notes from the hospital, and finally the recorder. "I have audio," I said. From a conversation where my parents pressured my grandmother to sign documents she didn't fully understand. Kaplan didn't react immediately. He just nodded and pressed a button on his desk. "Let's hear it." I played a segment. Karen's voice filled the room. "She won't even remember this next week anyway." Kaplan leaned back slightly, his expression tightening not in shock, but in recognition. He'd heard things like this before. "Pause it," he said. I did. He folded his hands. "First he said, 'This is strong.'" I exhaled slowly. But he added, "Strength depends on how and when it's used." I nodded. I figured. He tapped the table lightly. "Let me break this down in plain terms," he said. "Right now, you have 3 important elements." He held up one finger. Pattern. Repeated financial changes benefiting the same individuals. Second finger. Vulnerability. Medical evidence that your grandmother's decision-making capacity may be compromised at times. Third. Intent. That recording, especially that line, suggests awareness of her memory issues and a willingness to exploit them. He looked at me. "That combination matters." I nodded. "So what can we do?" Kaplan leaned forward slightly. "We don't rush into accusations," he said. "That's how cases fall apart." "I'm not trying to accuse," I said. "I'm trying to stop them." "And we will," he said calmly. "But we do it correctly." He slid one of the documents toward himself. "Right now they have power of attorney," he continued. "That gives them legal authority unless we can prove it was obtained improperly or used abusively. And the recording helps with that," I asked. "It can," he said. "Especially if it shows coercion or manipulation." I leaned back. "So we take it to court." "Eventually," he said. "But not yet." That word again. Not yet. "Why not?" I asked. "Because timing matters," he said. "If we move too early, they'll deny everything, tighten control, and potentially isolate your grandmother further." That hit harder than I expected. "They're already doing that," I said. "Yes," he replied, "but not completely. Not yet." He paused, letting that settle. "What we need," he continued, "is exposure in a context they can't control." I frowned slightly. "What kind of context?" He looked at me for a moment. "Witnesses," he said. I understood immediately. Not a private confrontation. Not a quiet legal filing. Something public. "Family gathering," I asked. "Something like that," he said. "A moment where multiple people can hear the same thing at the same time, where denial becomes difficult." I thought about it. There weren't many situations like that. Not naturally. "Unless," her funeral, I said quietly. Kaplan didn't react outwardly, but he didn't disagree either. "If it comes to that," he said carefully, "it would certainly meet the criteria." The words felt heavy in the room. I didn't like thinking that far ahead, but I understood the logic. He continued, "In the meantime, we prepare." "For what?" "For multiple outcomes," he said. "We secure additional documentation. We monitor any further transactions. And most importantly," he looked directly at me, "we protect your grandmother's ability to make independent decisions." I nodded. "How?" "We arrange for her to formally consult with me," he said, "privately, without your parents present." "They won't like that." "They don't have to," he replied. I let out a small breath. "And if they try to stop it?" Kaplan's expression didn't change. "Then that becomes part of the pattern." Of course it did. Everything they did now mattered. Everything added weight. I reached for the recorder again. "So we just wait?" I asked. "Not passively," he said. "Strategically." He slid a card across the desk. My direct number, he said. If anything changes even slightly, you call me. I picked it up. Okay. I stood gathering the documents back into my folder. As I did, Kaplan spoke again. One more thing. I paused. People in situations like this, he said, rarely see themselves as villains. I looked at him. They justify it, he continued. They convince themselves they're protecting something family legacy stability. That doesn't make it right, I said. No, he agreed, but it explains why they won't stop on their own. I nodded slowly. I've noticed. He gave a small knowing look. Good, he said. Then you won't underestimate them. On the drive back, his words stayed with me. Not villains. Not in their own minds. That didn't change what they were doing, but it explained the persistence, the confidence, the way they spoke like everything was already decided. When I got back to Naperville, Evelyn was sitting in her usual chair. She looked up as I walked in. Well, she asked. I set the folder down. We have options, I said. She studied my face. And we need to be patient, I added. She nodded slowly. I can do that, she said. I've had practice. I almost smiled. Good, I said. Because this isn't over. She looked toward the window, thoughtful. No, she said quietly. It's just beginning. And as I sat down across from her, one thing became clear. We weren't reacting anymore. We were preparing, but preparation only works if you know what you're preparing for. And deep down, I had the feeling my parents were already making their next move. By the time I pressed play at the funeral, I already knew how this would go, at least in theory. What I didn't know was how quickly everything would unravel. Karen's voice came through the small speaker first, steady and unmistakable. You don't need to worry about the details. That's what we're here for. A few people shifted uncomfortably. At first it didn't sound like much. Just a daughter reassuring her mother. But I didn't stop it there. I let it play. Richard's voice followed. It's better if the assets are under our control. That word again. Control. Now the murmurs started. Not loud, but enough. I didn't look at anyone. I kept my eyes on the ground in front of me, letting the recording do what it needed to do. Mom! Please, Karen's voice continued. Just sign it. A pause. Then Evelyn's voice quieter but clear. I don't like how that sounds. Another shift in the crowd. People were listening now. Really listening. I could feel it in the silence. Then came the line. The one that changed everything. She won't even remember this next week anyway. Karen's voice. Sharp. Unfiltered. Impossible to explain away. The reaction was immediate. A few gasps. Someone behind me whispered, "Did she just say that?" I closed my eyes for a second. Not out of hesitation, out of certainty. Because there was no going back now. I let the recording continue. You don't remember a lot of things lately. That's not fair. No one's saying it is. We're just being realistic. Every word landed heavier than the last. This wasn't interpretation anymore. It wasn't context. It was clarity. I finally looked up. Karen was frozen, completely still. Richard's jaw was tight, his eyes scanning the crowd like he was trying to calculate something damage maybe, or escape. Turn that off, Karen said suddenly. Her voice had changed. No warmth, no control, just urgency. No, I said calmly. This is not the time or place, Richard added, stepping forward. This is exactly the time, I replied. And the only place you couldn't control. That landed. Harder than anything else I'd said. Karen's composure cracked. You're twisting this, she said louder now. You don't understand the full conversation. Then explain it, I said. Silence. She didn't. Because she couldn't. Not in front of everyone. Not with the words already out there. I paused the recording but didn't turn it off. The device stayed in my hand. Visible. Real. Grandma asked to understand what she was signing. I said, my voice steady. And you told her she didn't need to. That's not what we meant, Richard said quickly. Then what did you mean, I asked? Again, no answer. Behind them I saw movement. My Aunt Karen's sister stepped forward slightly, her expression tight. Is this true? She asked quietly. Karen turned to her. Of course not, she said. This is being taken out of context. Then give us the context, I said. Nothing. The silence stretched, and in that silence,
Something shifted. Not just in the room, in the balance. Because for the first time, they weren't the ones controlling the narrative. The crowd was. The witnesses. The same people who had trusted them for years. Now watching. Now questioning. I pressed play again. This time I let the final segment run. Evelyn's voice. Clear. Firm. I'm not signing anything else today. Then Karen again. If you want to make this difficult, that's your choice. The recording ended. No dramatic finish. No music. Just silence. Real silence. I lowered the device. No one spoke for a few seconds. Then Richard tried. This is a private family matter, he said. It shouldn't be aired like this. It stopped being private when you took control of her finances, I replied. Karen shook her head. You're making us look like criminals, she said. I'm showing people what happened, I said. The rest is up to them. That was the moment. The shift. Because I wasn't arguing anymore. I wasn't defending. I wasn't asking. I was done explaining, and they could feel it. Karen's voice dropped. You've embarrassed this family, she said. I met her eyes. No, I said quietly. You did. Another silence. Heavier this time, because there was nothing left to say that wouldn't make it worse. Not for me. For them. I slipped the recorder back into my pocket. The damage wasn't in the device. It was already done. Around us, people started moving again, but differently. Closer. Quieter. Watching Karen and Richard, not me. And in that shift, in that subtle change of attention, everything became clear. They hadn't just lost control of the moment. They'd lost control of the story. The crowd didn't disperse the way it usually does after a funeral. No one rushed to their cars. No one made polite small talk about the weather or the service. They stayed, close enough to hear, far enough to pretend they weren't listening. But they were, every single one of them. Karen noticed it first. You all need to stop staring, she said sharply, her voice cutting through the quiet. This is inappropriate. No one moved. That silence again, not empty this time. Judging. My Aunt Diane, Karen's older sister, stepped forward slowly. Karen, she said, her tone controlled, you need to explain what we just heard. Karen turned to her defensive already. I already did, she said. It's being twisted. Then untwist it, Diane replied. Richard stepped in. This isn't the place, he said. We'll handle this privately. No, Diane said. You've handled things privately long enough. That landed. Hard. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The recording had already done what it was supposed to do. Now the room, no, the space was doing the rest. Another voice spoke up. My cousin Aaron. Wait, he said, looking between them. What did she mean by she won't remember? Karen's jaw tightened. She was confused sometimes, she said quickly. We were trying to help her manage things before it got worse. That's not what it sounded like, he replied. It sounded like you were taking advantage, Diane added. Karen's composure cracked again. That's not fair, she snapped. You weren't there. You don't know what it was like. I know what I just heard, Diane said. Richard raised his voice slightly. You're all jumping to conclusions based on a partial recording, he said. You don't have the full picture. I stepped forward then. Then let's complete the picture, I said. All eyes shifted to me again, because I wasn't done. Not yet. Before anyone could respond, I saw movement behind the crowd. Daniel Kaplan. He didn't rush. He didn't draw attention to himself. He just walked forward, steady and calm, until he was standing beside me. Karen's expression changed immediately. What is he doing here? She asked. Kaplan didn't answer her. Instead, he addressed the group. My name is Daniel Kaplan, he said. I'm an attorney representing Evelyn Harper's interests. That word interest shifted everything again. Because now, this wasn't just family conflict. It was legal. I was asked to be present today, he continued in case certain matters needed clarification. Karen let out a short, disbelieving laugh. You planned this? She said, looking at me. No, I replied calmly. You did. Kaplan held up a folder. There's one more item, he said. Something Evelyn prepared before her passing. Silence fell again. He opened the folder carefully. A written statement, he said, signed, witnessed, and notarized. Richard stepped forward. This is ridiculous, he said. You can't just... Kaplan raised a hand slightly. I can, he said, and I will. That stopped him. Because authority, when it's real, doesn't need to be loud. Kaplan looked down at the paper, then began to read. I, Evelyn Harper, state clearly that I have not knowingly or willingly transferred full control of my assets to any individual, including my children. A murmur spread through the group. Karen's face went pale. Kaplan continued. I have felt pressured to sign documents I did not fully understand. I request that any such documents be reviewed independently. Richard shook his head. This is manipulation, he said. She was confused. Kaplan didn't stop reading. I trust my granddaughter, Madeline Long, to ensure my wishes are respected and that my decisions are not overridden without my full understanding. The words hung in the air. Clear, direct, final. Kaplan lowered the paper. That statement, he said, was executed 3 weeks before her hospitalization. Karen looked like she was searching for anything to hold on to. This doesn't prove anything, she said. People say things when they're scared. Kaplan met her gaze. It proves intent, he said. And combined with the recording, it establishes a pattern that will be very difficult to defend. The word defend echoed, because now, this wasn't about explanation. It was about consequences. Richard stepped back slightly. Not much, but enough. Enough for me to see it. The shift. The realization. They weren't controlling this anymore. They were reacting. Diane spoke again. You need to tell us the truth, she said to Karen. All of it. Karen didn't answer, for the first time since this started. She didn't have anything to say. I watched her carefully. Not with anger. Not anymore. Just clarity. Because I understood something now that I hadn't fully seen before. They hadn't expected resistance. Not from Evelyn. Not from me. And definitely not from everyone else. Kaplan closed the folder. We will be initiating a formal review of all financial transactions, he said. Any irregularities will be addressed through the appropriate legal channels. No threats, no raised voice, just facts. Richard looked at me. You're really doing this, he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. Yes. Karen finally spoke again, but her voice was quieter now. You're tearing this family apart, she said. I held her gaze. No, I said. I'm refusing to pretend it isn't already broken. That was the truth. The real one. Not the version they'd been managing. Around us, people began to move again, but not away. Closer. To Kaplan. To me. Asking questions. Offering quiet support. And behind all of it, Karen and Richard stood alone. Not physically, but in something more important. Credibility. And once that's gone, it doesn't come back easily. As the crowd slowly shifted, Kaplan leaned slightly toward me. This is where it changes, he said quietly. I nodded. I knew, because for the first time, we weren't the ones trying to prove something. They were. And that's a position they'd never prepared for. 3 weeks after the funeral, I sat across from my parents in Daniel Kaplan's office. The same calm, glass-walled space, but it felt very different now. Not because of the room, because of the positions we were in. Karen and Richard weren't leading the conversation anymore. They were waiting for it to begin. Kaplan sat at the head of the table, a folder open in front of him. Before we start, he said, I want to be clear this is not a confrontation. It's a review of facts. Karen crossed her arms. It feels like a confrontation, she said. That depends on how you respond to the facts, Kaplan replied calmly. Richard didn't speak. He just stared at the documents on the table. Kaplan turned a page. We've completed a preliminary analysis of Evelyn Harper's accounts, he said. Over the past 6 months, there were multiple transfers and structural changes that significantly altered control and beneficiary distribution. He slid a printed summary toward them. Specifically, he continued a series of incremental transfers totaling approximately $214,000 were moved into accounts under your control. Karen didn't touch the paper. That was for her care, she said. Kaplan nodded slightly. That's one explanation, he said. However, there is no corresponding record of expenses that would justify that amount. Silence. Richard finally spoke. We were managing things, he said. She asked us to. Kaplan didn't argue. He just tapped another document.
"This is the notarized statement Evelyn prepared," he said. "In it, she explicitly states she did not knowingly authorize full control of her assets."
Karen's voice tightened. She was confused, she said again.
"You're taking advantage of that."
Kaplan looked at her.
"The recording suggests otherwise," he said. "It indicates she was asking for clarity and being discouraged from seeking it."
Karen opened her mouth, then closed it, because there was nothing new to say, nothing that hadn't already been heard. Kaplan folded his hands.
"At this point, we have two paths," he said.
Richard leaned forward slightly.
"What paths?" he asked.
"Cooperation," Kaplan said, "or litigation." The word sat heavy between us.
Cooperation means returning disputed funds, relinquishing control of any accounts obtained under questionable circumstances, and agreeing to an independent audit.
Karen shook her head immediately. "And litigation?" she asked.
Kaplan didn't hesitate.
"Formal legal action.
Claims of financial exploitation, potential fraud and breach of fiduciary duty."
Silence. Real silence this time, because now there were consequences attached. Richard looked at the table, his jaw tight. Karen looked at me. "This is what you wanted?" she said. I met her eyes. "No," I said. "This is what happened." She didn't like that answer, but she didn't challenge it either, because she couldn't.
Kaplan gave them a moment. Then he spoke again. "You don't have to decide today," he said. "But the timeline is not open-ended."
Richard exhaled slowly. "We need time," he said.
Kaplan nodded. "You have a few days." That was it. No pressure. No dramatics. Just reality. They chose cooperation. Not immediately, not gracefully, but eventually. Over the next month, funds were returned, most of them. Some had already been moved in ways that took longer to untangle, but the majority came back into a properly structured estate account. The expanded financial authorizations were revoked. An independent executor was assigned, and for the first time in months, everything was transparent, clean, accountable, legally sound. I didn't celebrate. There was nothing to celebrate, because even though the outcome was fair, the cost was still there. I saw my parents one more time after everything was finalized. Not in a courtroom, not in an office. Just a quiet meeting at a small cafe. Karen looked tired, not defeated, just different. Richard didn't speak much. "You didn't have to do it like that," Karen said after a while. "The funeral I asked." She nodded. "I thought about it, about timing, about witnesses, about truth." "Yes," I said. "I did." She looked down at her coffee. "We were trying to keep things together," she said. "I know," I replied. That surprised her. Richard finally looked up. "Then why didn't you just come to us?" he asked. I held his gaze. "I did," I said. "You just didn't hear me." Silence. Not tense. Just final. "I'm not cutting you off," I added after a moment, "but things aren't going back to how they were." Karen nodded slowly. "I figured. Because some lines once crossed don't get erased. They get remembered and respected." A few weeks later, I went back to my grandmother's house. It was quiet, still, but not heavy, different. I sat in her chair, the one by the window, and looked around. Everything was where she left it. Nothing rewritten, nothing rearranged to fit someone else's version. I took out the recorder from my bag, the same one, small, ordinary, powerful. I didn't play it. I didn't need to, because the point was never the recording itself. It was what it protected. Her voice, her choices, her truth, and maybe mine too. After everything, the hardest part wasn't proving the truth. It was accepting what the truth meant. Sometimes the people who hurt you aren't trying to destroy you. They're trying to control a version of reality that benefits them and convincing themselves it's for the greater good. That's what makes it complicated. That's what makes it painful. If you've ever been in a situation where your voice was dismissed, where family was used as a reason to ignore your boundaries, you already understand this. Protecting yourself is not the same as seeking revenge. Boundaries aren't punishment. They're clarity. And forgiveness, if it ever comes, doesn't mean giving someone the same access they had before. It means you've decided not to carry the weight anymore. If this story resonated with you, I'd really like to hear your perspective. Have you ever had to stand up for the truth when it cost you something? And if you want more stories like this, real, grounded, and honest, consider subscribing. This is a fictional story created for entertainment, education, and reflection.